You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
So let's kick off with some good old-fashioned conspiracy peddling that had some very real origins, but like so many of the best conspiracy theories, turned out to take actual events and turn them into a pile of bollocks.
Now we're through the looking glass here, people.
Klatu, Barada, Nikto.
Yep, Klatu, Barada, Nikto. I always wondered what those words meant.
Oh, it means live from New York. It's Saturday night.
As the Cold War dissolved with the iconic visuals of the Berlin Wall crumbling before the world's media, the secret wall of clandestine intelligence activities and shadowy organizations began to break up.
Pronto? E chi parla? Indipendentemente dal fatto che lei abbia il telefono sotto controllo, ma io voglio sapere chi parla. Brigata Rossa.
No clearer ripping off of the scab that covered all manner of nasties was demonstrated than in the activities of the Italian secret world of Gladio and Sismi, the Italian equivalent of CIA or South Africa's boss, not to be confused with the manufacturer of expensive designer gear with a slightly dodgy origin story.
In the aftermath of the aborted coup, the existence of the parallel structures of Gladio was uncovered.
Da insistere in questo suo progetto politico, perché avrebbe pagato cara questa sua cocciutaggine.
With the very public investigations of highly placed individuals connected with the Christian Democratic Party that had held on to power in Italy in some form of coalition or another, came the pretty much ridiculous suggestion that they had engineered the kidnap and ultimate murder of senior party hack and many-time Prime Minister Aldo Moro. Like so many conspiracy theories, many loose connections were woven into a wonderful plot tapestry worthy of John le Carré.
Jump, Alec! Jump, man!
But considerably less plausible than anything he might concoct.
At the start of the Cold War in 1947, one Western country in particular popped up on the anti-communist radar. Italy. Once a fascist country, much of its population were now flirting with communism.
Inizialmente nel mandato che il Parlamento ci aveva dato, noi dovevamo occuparci delle stragi irrisolte in Italia, a cominciare dalla prima grossa piazza Fontana.
Petiano nasce come un atto di rivolta, come un segnale di rivolta contro questa strumentalizzazione, colpendo l'arma più rappresentativa dello Stato.
On May the 31st, 1972, the Carabinieri in Petiano received a phone call.
To start off with then, Gladio was real. It was the name given to the so-called stay-behind clandestine armed groups that operated throughout Europe, colluding with some particularly nasty elements of the extreme right and various political parties that went on to form things like Reform.
They should be detained ahead of them being deported.
Nowhere were there better examples of these strange offshoots of European intelligence communities than in Italy.
They were managed by the local secret services in close cooperation with the CIA and MI6. In each country, the network had its own name: Gladio in Italy, SDRA-8 in Belgium, Über alle Agenten in Germany.
With creepy groups like Il Nuovo, Sismi did collude with the CIA to secretly manipulate public perceptions of the Communist Party, setting up CIA-funded publications, both very right and very left-leaning, in order to muddy the waters.
If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist.
With rogue players of the Theodore Shackley type providing weapons and other assistance to these nasty Gladio people.
So it was always, we'll help you, we'll teach you how to do something, but you guys have to do it yourselves, and we're not even going to tell you what to do, but we assume that you know.
What did we do it for? What did we do it for?
Unwittingly aided and abetted, of course, by the psychopathic loons of the Red Brigade, and rather more wittingly, of course, by the right-wing terrorism that was occasionally funded by a secret Masonic organisation, P2, created by Lucio Gelli, in response to legitimate Masonic lodges being forced to adhere to Italian law requiring them to list their memberships and fundraising activities in Italy. He decided it would be much more fun to assemble Nazi-type right-wingers such as Silvio Berlusconi, Admiral Gino Brindelli, Fabrizio Chicocito, and in Argentina, Guillermo Suarez Mason, Jose Lopez Rega, and Albert Vignes, to name a few people who were slightly right of Attila the Hun. With his innumerable contacts, he was deeply involved in helping to fund and connect components of Operation Condor in South America, before turning his attention to the enemy within, as he saw it.
Io non credo che nessuno abbia messo la bomba a Bologna, quello è stato un incidente di trasporto. In quell'epoca l'esplosivo si trovava quasi ai supermercati in Italia e qualcuno che veniva dall'est e aveva questi pani, senz'altro erano gente che lo trasportavano a altre parti e si sono fermati, forse era già il 2 di agosto, non dobbiamo dimenticarlo, erano giornate in cui c'era grandissimo calore, qualcuno passando ha preso la sigaretta e l'ha gettata lontano così, senza volere, senza pensare. Quelli che trasportavano l'esplosivo sono quelle vittime che non hanno saputo identificare e che ce ne sono tre morti che non hanno saputo identificare perché erano ridotti in potpiglia.
Gelli used P2 to build an impressive list of highly placed people within the world of government, media, intelligence and businessmen, some of whom found themselves the object of his blackmailing activities, once they'd been initiated in this particularly criminal version of a Masonic lodge. Although Martin Short would claim they're all criminals, I tell you. However, that does not mean that John Paul I was assassinated to prevent the exposure of the Vatican Bank being embroiled in a scandal with Banco Ambrosiano.
The scandal has already caused acute embarrassment for the Vatican and instability in the international banking system.
It all started on May 31st. Italian authorities walked into the headquarters of Italy's largest private bank, Banco Ambrosiano, and started asking embarrassing questions. Within 10 weeks, both the bank's president, Roberto Calvi, and his secretary were dead.
Or that Moro was sacrificed because of his compromise to bring the communists into a shaky coalition government in 1978.
Adempiamo le ultime volontà, comunicando alla famiglia dove potrà trovare il corpo dell'onorevole Aldo Moro.
I servizi segreti avevano un informatore che li avvertì con anticipo che quella mattina del 16 marzo del 1978 Aldo Moro sarebbe stato...
It just felt like these things could be true because so much of the stuff that was emerging following the collapse of the Soviet system and the protective layers of anti-communist sentiment was eroding away very, very quickly.
Risulta che all'estero perché appunto non vuole più...
Exposing information through judicial reviews, journalistic exposés, and revisiting information that had been previously uncovered and largely ignored by the world's media.
What we were doing is either with the government, secretly, or independently on our own, looking for people who might perform this function in some country where you didn't have that connection with the government or whatever, or maybe you did as a supplement.
Gladio was a real operation that grew out of extreme right-wing former fascists feeling a bit unloved, now that Nazis and corrupt racist bigots were no longer all the rage in Italy and the Benelux countries, and were egged on by Looney Tune figures in US intelligence such as James Jesus Angleton.
I believe there are inherent rights in the President of the United States to advance national security It's inherent in his election.
There are those, of course, who would say, forgive me, there are those, of course, who would say that the CIA's wings were simply clipped, that they had been going too far, too fast, too freely.
Oh, there are those who will say anything.
Although, in fairness, there is pretty much no evidence suggesting that the terrorist attacks, for instance, in Bologna Station in 1980 and the brazen gun fest in a Belgian supermarket in Alost in 1985 were in any way planned or directly connected to Western intelligence.
Alors nous allons vous adresser un nouveau message. Il se trouve 26 avenue Général de Gaulle, en face des étangs d'Ixelles, dans l'entrée en dessous des boîtes aux lettres.
In cases where the infiltration of agents into the insurgent leadership has not been effectively implemented, it may help to utilize ultra-leftist organizations.
But there did seem to be a concerted lack of effort in trying to rein in the activities of organizations like Nuclei Aromatei, sounds like a kind of chocolate drink, and Il Nuovo, who perpetrated these type of atrocities. And so we come to one of the more outlandish allegations levelled at Gladio and members of P2 that they instigated, through the use of plants in the Red Brigade, the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. And this, in fact, was the subject of a number of documentaries that seem to tie a load of loose strands and conclude that 2 and 2 makes 5.
C'è stupore perché, innanzitutto, perché per chi era Moro e cosa significava Moro. Cioè io non pensavo mai che i compagni fuori avessero la forza e la capacità di portare a termine un sequestro militarmente così complesso.
But if it was Gladio and not the Red Brigades behind the attack, why would the left-wing terrorists own up to it? Cottrell believes the key is the leader of the Red Brigades at the time, a man called Mario Moretti, who he thinks had strong links to the Italian Secret Service and even lived in a building owned by...
The central reasoning behind this somewhat improbable theory was the fact that the manpower-heavy but seemingly surface efforts of the authorities to locate the wily politician and the unwillingness of the Christian Democrats to negotiate for his release seemed to substantiate the charges that the Christian Democrats appeared quite happy to be rid of him, and when he turned up dead in the boot of a red Renault, no less, oh, the banality, it gave them all the excuses they needed to renege on a deal brokered with the communists for some reason. Like the threads being woven together in the Branco Ambrosiana scandal, the connections appear to be more substantial than they actually were under closer examination.
And honestly, I might have believed this conspiracy theory if this movie didn't exist.
Still, it makes for a good story, and let's face it, everyone loves to blame the CIA.
Yeah, CIA.
Which certainly has been involved in some very shady black ops in countries like Laos, Cambodia, Iran, Egypt, Salvador, Chile, the DRC, Guatemala, and so on. But each bit of Cold War misadventure has to be judged individually, and not as strands of some ridiculous overriding spectre-like conspiracy.
I didn't spend 6 years in evil medical school to be called Mr. Thank You Very Much.
As people like Oliver Stone,
the CIA,
Gregory.
You think the 2 Kennedy assassinations, the Martin Luther King assassination, and the Wallace attempt were all linked and possibly linked by the CIA?
I think so, and I think it can be proven.
And the Christic Institute would have you believe.
There exists, in operation now, a secret team of some 24 men, former Central Intelligence Agency covert operatives, former U.S. Pentagon arms suppliers, who have joined together in a private enterprise outside of the control of the American government, either the Congress or the President, who are mounting their personal wars around the world.
But if you don't adhere to this theory, you're obviously all part of it, and the world is actually a cube.
Birds are real. Birds are real. Birds are real. Birds are real.